Daf.
Which is
Okay. We're holding, let's see, Gimel. Gimel Amud Aleph, Kachi Kachim, about 8 lines from the top.
right.
Thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. And in the schus of our learning, we should have the base of English immediately.
Right.
So, I guess we have to go back to talk about Reb Shimon. Shimon's opinion was, let me just do this 1 second. Shimon's opinion was that even though certain times, if a person has a thought by a sacrifice, by a korban mincha, that it would possibly invalidate the sacrifice, that thought, or it would at least make it that the owner won't satisfy his obligation because he had that thought. Shimon says, if the thought is obviously wrong, then the practical, what we see visually, overrides the thought, and we just ignore the thought. He calls it Maseches Menachos Daf. You see that that's not so. So just toss out the thought. It's not. It's insignificant because you see he has thoughts that he was supposed to bring it in. The thoughts that this mincha is really a deep pan, and it's a flat pan. This is well, that's ridiculous. It's a deep pan. So you just toss out the thought, and it's fine. The Chacham didn't say that. The Chacham said that it doesn't satisfy the owner's obligation. He says, oh yes, it would even satisfy the owner's obligation. That it's not going to matter. Just toss it out. Shimon does it connect to potential. Why did we say Reb Shimon had to do with potential? No, we said Reb Shimon had to do with thought. Reb Shimon said the thought was the main thing. Now he's saying the thought's not the main thing, so it sort of contradicts his view. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda says that the thought wasn't the main thing. Rabbi Yehuda says on Shabbos that Davashin Miskaven is chayiv. We don't care that you didn't have the thought. And Rabbi Shimon says the thought's the main thing. I don't know if I'm going to be able to put it together with the rest of Shas. I'm just going to have to leave it as isolated machlaikas. Okay, Rabbi Daniel will figure it out for us. Okay, so it says we said like this. We're in the middle of Reb Shimon's. We said that Maseches Menachos is would disregard the thought. The only thing that we said, the one detail here, is we said that this was only by a korban mincha, not by anything else. However, in our learning yesterday, we came across that it does apply to other things as well. It says that if someone shechts a chata sa'if, he does malika on a chata sa'if. He has intention for an oila sa'if. Let me see if I'm getting this right. He's a chata sa'if. The blood was sprinkled. If he sprinkles the blood of a chata sa'if for the sake of an oila sa'if, so we said, well, obviously it's a chata sa'if, because if it would be an oila sa'if, then it would be above, and you wouldn't sprinkle it. You would squeeze it out. So we said, yeah, actually, you're right. Reb Shimon would actually agree with that. That would be another example where Reb Shimon would agree that Maseches Menachos, you just toss out the thought, because the thought is obviously not correct. You just toss it out, and then we're left with just what we have at hand, which is, and we ignore the thought. Okay. What else to be answered? Yeah, we had a contradiction in Reb Shimon. We'll get back to. We'll get back to that. Now we're starting Kachi Kachim Sheshachtan Batzafan. Let's say if you have Kachi Kachim, those are the holy sacrifices, which are supposed to be slaughtered on the north. And you did slaughter it on the north. However, you had intention, L'Shem Kachim Kalim. You had intention for sacrifices which are allowed to be slaughtered on the south. It says Lirtzu. That should be an acceptable sacrifice, even for the owner. It should satisfy the owner's obligation. Why? Because Maseches Menachos Aleim the Kachi Kachim. Because we should toss out the thought. Because we see that it's Kachi Kachim. And Reb Shimon holds But you look at the action, if it clearly contradicts the thought, you ignore the thought. If it would have been kachim kalim, he would have done it on the south. You didn't do it on the south, you did it on the north. Obviously, it's what it's supposed to be. Your thoughts were wrong, but we ignore the thoughts when it's obviously not like that. The Gemara answers, it says, no. It doesn't say that kachim kalim are only allowed to be on the south. It says that kachim kalim are also on the south. So the fact that you did it on the north does not tell me anything that it's about if it's kachim kachim or kachim kalim, because both of those could be on the north. If it would have been the other way, if you would have done kachim kalim on the south and you had intention for kachim kachim, which the Gemara is about to tell us, so then that would be a different story because kachim kachim is not allowed to be on the south. So obviously it's not kachim kachim. So your thoughts are right. But this way, you're allowed to do it on the north. If I'm not mistaken, Taisa says, what was our Havamina? Of course, you're allowed to do it on the north. Why were we even thinking that this would be a problem? Taisa says that maybe you would be careful not to do it on the north specifically, because you don't want anyone to think that it's kachim kachim. So you would specifically do it on the south. So because that was common practice, maybe I could have thought that common practice would now tell me that obviously it's not kachim kachim, it's really kachim kalim. So obviously it's not kachim kalim because kachim kalim would be on the south. It's really kachim kachim. So we say that no, that's just common practice. That doesn't mean that that's the rule. That's really not a proof. Okay, so now the Gemara switches it to the other way. Let's see. B'dar mele b'tzaf miyamar. It doesn't say b'dar mele b'tzaf. And the Tanana was taught in the Mishnah shchitasim b'chol makom azara that you're allowed to shecht it anywhere. So kachim kalim, you're allowed to shecht anywhere, even on the north. So the fact that you shechted kachim kachim on the north with the thoughts of kachim kalim doesn't mean that it's clearly not kachim kalim, because kachim kalim could go there anyway. Could be shechted there. Kachim kalim sheshachta madarim. Let's go the other way. Let's say it's of lesser holiness, and you slaughtered it on the south. Shem kachim kachim, for the sake of kachim kachim. So it's obviously not kachim kachim. So we could say like this. Could say lirtu. It should say it should be an appeasement for the owner. Obviously it's kachim kalim because kachim kachim is not slaughtered on this side of the mizbeach. This is on the south side. The kachim kachim, if it would be kachim kachim, there's a rule that you can't slaughter it here. It actually could invalidate it. Amri, they said. Okay, now we're opening up a what is this, like a can of worms? This is we're not going to be able to get all this back to the way we once we say the answer that we're saying right here, then it messes up all of our thoughts, because we're saying that really it's actually kachim kachim. You know, you're ma'aseh, not mechichim. The fact that you're doing it on the south, does not mean that it's not kachim kachim. It could really be that it is kachim kachim. So then why are you doing it on the south? It says, well, you violated it. You violated the rule. So now you'll never have ma'aseh mechichin. Every time you wanted to say that, well, the way you're doing it shows that it's this type of sacrifice. So maybe it's not that type of sacrifice. Maybe it's the type of sacrifice that is of the way you're thinking. And it would be disqualified. Really, right? That's the problem. Maybe it's really that sacrifice, and it's really the sacrifice of your thinking, not the way what you're doing. And so, why are you doing it over there? It's because you violated the rule. So the whole ma'aseh mechichin just gets thrown out. When we talk about potential, when we talk about the Rebbe talks about Basil Beishamai, if you look at the potential, if you look at those things, how many days do I have left? Remember by Hanukkah, do I look at how many days I have left, or do I look at how many days I have already? The actual or the potential. This is something else. This is stretching it to say that this is potential. This is talking about, are my thoughts as strong as an action that will outweigh what I see visually? That's the question over here. Or do I say that thoughts are insignificant compared to what I have at hand in front of me? Reb Shimon is saying that your thoughts are insignificant. If you're doing it different, then just ignore the thoughts, because what you're seeing in front of you is clearly different. Just ignore the thought. Now the question is like this: if someone is doing something, he has the thoughts of a different sacrifice, right? If he has thoughts of a different sacrifice, so if it's clearly not that sacrifice, so then Reb Shimon would say, so ignore the thoughts. Those thoughts are clearly insignificant and clearly wrong, because the action is so strong that it just nullifies those thoughts. You see that that's not so. Just ignore it. There's nothing there. Just you see what it is. But now we've just coming up with the problem that you're never able to say that. What do you mean you see what it is? Because maybe it's really not this, and it looks like it is this because the laws tell me that it's this. Because maybe he's violating the laws and he's doing it all wrong. So I just lost all of my Maseches. Yeah, Daniel, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's almost like Reb Shimon is giving the Kohen the benefit of the doubt. Like, he obviously wouldn't make that mistake, He knows deep inside, he knows what he's doing.
Right.
Is this a general discussion about act versus intent?
That's what it seems like.
Yeah, it's not necessarily specific to this example, it seems.
Right. Question is, why don't we have this everywhere in Shas? So later on, we're going to show that it's not so simple. It could be based on psukim, and this Maaseh Mechichen is actually just a distraction. It's not really the main thing. This is a secondary thought over here. It's really based on psukim that is specifically by a mincha. We'll see when we turn the page and when we get into it. Right. The Gemara challenges this answer with Yihachi Machvas Hashem Macheshes Nami. The whole basis of Reb Shimon was if someone is bringing a mincha, right, the meal offering, the flour, and he's bringing it in a flat pan, and he has intention that it's a deep pan. Reb Shimon says that, what do you care with intention? You see clearly it's a flat pan, and that's exactly what he was supposed to bring. It says, Haidika kamasle lamarcheshes, Amar, maybe he's having thoughts by the kmitza that it's for a deep pan. And Amar, he says, Hi marcheshes nada. Really, it is a deep pan type of sacrifice, because he pledged the deep pan. Really, so why is he bringing it in the flat pan if it's really the deep pan, and according to his thoughts? The marcheshes, it's marcheshes, and he's violating the rule, and he's bringing it in a flat pan. The whole basis of Reb Shimon, we just lost it. He said, don't think that it's really the way he's thinking, because you see that practically, you see how he's doing it. He's bringing it in a flat pan. No, maybe it is the way he's thinking. Maybe the thinking is correct, that it really is a marcheshes. It really is a deep pan. Why? So why is he bringing it in a flat? Well, he violated the rule. He's bringing it in a flat pan. He's doing it wrong.
Why can't you bring a raya from Kedus Yitzchak that the period, the act is confused? Because we don't really know. Maybe Abraham, the last second, was going to do it. He doesn't say me the last second. I'm just not doing it. We really don't know his mashal, but yet the angel comes and says, Yana says, I see you doing it. So why can't you bring a raya there? That if you see it, that's what it is. Nobody has to question that.
That's a good raya.
What?
It's a good raya.
But no one brings it, so it can't be a good. I mean, it's a
Oh,
good
no,
child,
no.
but it's not a good raya.
Because you bring a raya from an individual. You're not bringing a raya from
An individual, the founder of free
But in that case,
Basically,
if Hashem sent the angels, because clearly he was going to do it. Hashem knows.
clearly he was testing him on something he
Okay.
could do. But it was up to him.
Dr. Stein, you got to write your own Gemara.
Because
Wait, let me have the other call.
if he wasn't going to do it, why would Hashem send the angel?
Okay, it's a good point.
Forget about it.
The Gemara says no. You're mixing things up when it says that we're going to lose the Maseches Menachos by the machavas and the marcheshes, because really maybe it really is a marcheshes. Are you bringing the machavas? Are you bringing the flat pan? That's because he's just violating the rule. Hasam kinami b'marcheshes nadar. We're not over there. It's different. We're not so concerned about that, because let's say he actually did pledge to bring a deep pan mincha. If you do bring it in a machvas, then machvas habi, then it becomes a machvas. So that whole concept of maybe it was really a marcheshes, and his thoughts of marcheshes are really accurate, and the fact that he's bringing it in a machvas, that's insignificant because he's just violating the rules, and the thoughts are the most powerful. We're saying no, it doesn't work like that, because let's say he pledged the marcheshes, and he's bringing it in a machvas. So we're anyways going to ignore the fact that he pledged the marcheshes, and we're going to say it becomes a machvas. Keditanan, as it was taught in the Mishnah, we ignore the pledge anyway, and we'll just say, look, what you pledged was a deep pan, but you brought it in a flat pan. So he said, well, this is a different one. So there's no problem. It just you didn't do the pledge, but it's a machva. So over here we're going to say that the thoughts don't matter, because even the thoughts don't matter, even if he had originally pledged this, and the thoughts that he's having now that it should be a deep pan matches with what he pledged. Well, so what? Because you're bringing it in a flat pan, it becomes a flat pan. That's what it is.
It's two different things.
Right. This is what you brought. And you just didn't. This is a different sacrifice. You pledged something else, and you didn't bring that, so it's fine. This is what it is. The Gemara says, but v'dilma amar zula havi b'machvas. That's only if he said harei alai. I'm pledging on myself. I'm taking a pledge that I'm going to bring a marcheshes. What's the base over here? Just 1 second. Or he pledges, I'm going to bring a flat pan, whichever one. But let's say he doesn't say it like that. Let's say he says, this is, instead of saying, I will, he says, this is, right? Harezu, behold, this is. He says, this flour is going to be brought in a flat pan, and he brings it in a deep pan. Keditanan, we switched the cases. Keditanan, as was said in the Mishnah, becomes invalid. We're asking, why should it be? We're asking that according to Reb Shimon, he pledges to bring it in one, and he had intention for something else. So you're supposed to follow what is being brought. What it's being brought as, right? You're supposed to follow what it's being brought as, not what he. But then we said, but maybe it really is the way he's thinking, and he's just violating it. So the fact that he's bringing it, so we said, well, that wouldn't matter, because whatever you bring it in, whatever pan you bring it in, that's what it becomes. So we're saying not always. Sometimes it's actually the way you pledged. If you said harezu. So we're back to the question of, let's say he pledged it, that this is what he's supposed to bring. And Reb Shimon's supposed to say, Maseches Menachos, that the way you're bringing it is the way it's supposed to be, and the problem is that your thoughts are different than the way you're bringing it. And we said, well, but the fact is you're bringing it like this. He said, no, the fact that you're bringing it like that doesn't prove anything, because maybe you're just violating what you really intended, and that would all become invalid. The Gemara says, no, what you just quoted to me, where you said, Harei Zu, it becomes invalid, that's the Rabbanan Hachinami, you're right, that's what the rabbis would say. However, the Reb Shimon, according to Reb Shimon, Kimudam Reb Shimon, Af Yedei Nidra Yotza, Reb Shimon says differently. Reb Shimon says, if you pledge to bring in a flat pan and you bring it in a deep pan, so the rabbis would say that, okay, so you brought a deep pan and so bring another one in the flat pan. But Reb Shimon wouldn't say that. Reb Shimon would say that you even satisfied the pledge. You brought it in the wrong one. He says, Alma kvisa demano v'leiklamu. Leishnamar zu v'leishnamar alai. It doesn't matter what he does. Reb Shimon would say that the pan that you brought it in doesn't matter. And he looks at all the pans like as if they're all the same. Let's see if that's exactly the way the commentaries want to learn this. For use of the mana, like klum.
Right.
That the way that a person pledges with his mouth, which utensil he's going to bring it in, that's insignificant. Whether he brings it as, whether he says that he's going to bring this and he brings it in that, whether he says he's going to bring that, brings in this, it's all going to be good. And it doesn't matter if he says harizu or harei. Sorry.
The offering doesn't change. So that's-
Right.
When he brings it, is he bringing it in a changed vessel? In other words, he makes it either in a deep pan or thin pan, and then before he brings it, doesn't he put it into another vessel and bring it?
Yeah, that's
So
the problem
then-
over here with that.
So it actually negates the whole shaila, because whatever he's bringing it in, it's whatever he made it, is what it is.
Right.
So how can you make the question that so now he's bringing, maybe that was the only pan available at them. You know, for the secondary pan. Only a little bit he's bringing.
Yeah, I'm not sure right here in the Gemara what we're holding with, because our original issue was maybe whatever he's pledging, maybe the original designation of this mincha is really according to the way he's thinking, which we said was incorrect because it doesn't match the way he's bringing it. And now we're saying that, well, in that thought, maybe it's really the way he's thinking. We see the way he's bringing it is different. He said, okay, so he's violating it. And so we lose the Maaseh Menachos. He said, well, ignore his thoughts, because the way he's doing it is the most significant. And now we're saying that it really doesn't matter if he brings it like this or he brings it like that. So where are we holding in Reb Shimon? What does Reb Shimon want this to be? That we're going to follow the thoughts, we follow the way he's doing it. If it was designated one way, he's thinking that the same way it was designated, but he's bringing it differently. So which one is it now? Well, let's say he's speaking his thoughts.
Is that, you're narrowing it down to two things, which really three. It's his thoughts, it's what did he actually make? Did he make a high loaf, flat bread?
That's myself.
And then in the end, which keli did he bring it in? So there's actually three steps here.
Yeah.
Which one did he really make is what counts.
I mean, the last step, Kedusha Sakeli.
No, the one in the middle, because if you brought flatbread in a Maseches, whatever, the large pan, because whatever, it doesn't change flatbread into raised challah dough, you know what I'm saying? And vice versa.
Okay.
So I don't know where it is.
Okay, I'm not
The Quran.
Tell me
The
the
Quran.
Quran.
The Quran seems to say that his initial designation in his mind Ahari Alai, that doesn't matter. It didn't really mean one or the other. He just wanted to bring a meal offering, and the fact that he brought this one is good enough proof of what he wanted to bring in the first place.
So we'll still say Maseh Mechichen.
Yeah.
I maybe he's just doing it wrong. How do we know Maseh Mechichen? Now basically then we're still left with the question. Maybe how do you know Maseh Mechichen? Maybe the way he's thinking is correct, and what he's doing is just wrong.
Well, is there any hektish? There's no hektish, so maybe his machshavas doesn't really matter.
But yeah, that's another point over here. That's Jonathan. Yes, he wants to know who's talking.
I thought it was. It was like.
Jonathan, you can't talk unless you show up here.
Don't let him bully
downstairs.
you, Jonathan.
No,
Don't let
you
him bully
can't
you.
sit downstairs and you cushy seat.
Don't let him bully you.
Stop being such a bully. I'll see you after class.
Okay, see me after class, please. Right? Okay. Now the Gemara has another question. The Gemara says, "Elameata, if that's the case, oila sheshachat l'shem chatas tirtze. What about an oila, an elevation offering, a burnt offering, that was shechted with the intention that it should be a chatas? So Reb Shimon should say, Maseh Mechichen. It's clearly an oila, the high zachar behind the keva, because the oila is a male animal, and the chatas is a female animal. So Reb Shimon that holds Maseh Mechichen, so it should clearly be Maseh Mechichen. And it's not the same offering. So we said before that if you're bringing an oila for the sake of a chatas, the sacrifice is accepted, but he has to bring another one to satisfy his pledge. Now Reb Shimon should say that he doesn't have to bring another one because it's clearly an oila. He had thoughts of a chatas. Ignore the thoughts of a chatas because it's clearly an oila. That's Reb Shimon holds. Yeah, so we ignore the thoughts of the issue before was that each of those vessels meant it was a different offering. There's 5 different types. So if you switch it from one offering to another offering, which meant one vessel to another vessel, so then Reb Shimon says it doesn't matter because the vessel that you're bringing in shows what it really is, and you can ignore the mistaken thoughts. So here we can ignore the mistaken thoughts because we see what it really is. We see it's an island. Okay, the Gemara says, "Kimin the kasar nasi dezacharu la yediyah." It says, actually, you don't know that it's an ayla because there is one type of chatas that's also a male. That's if a king does a sin, he brings a male goat. Amar l'shem chatas yachid ma'ikol mimra. Let's say he says that this is his intention is that it's a chatas yachid. Really, it's an ayla, and he's intending that it's a private chatas, not a chatas of it. No, his thoughts or his statement is that it's really a chatas yachid. But clearly, it can't be a chatas; it's a male. The chatas yachid shach l'shem ayla tirtze. The chatas negev l'zachar. We could go the other way also. A chatas yachid that's being brought for an ayla is clearly not an ayla. It's clearly not an ayla. So it should say Maseh Mechichen. It should be acceptable because the thoughts should be nothing because it clearly can't be that sacrifice. The Gemara says, well, actually, michasya ba'alya. When you're bringing the sheep as a chatas, you have intention that it's an ayla, it really could be an ayla. The ayla is a male. It says, well, you can't tell if it's male or female because it has this tail, this fat tail, covering it, so you can't tell. That would only be if it's a sheep that has the fat tail. But the goat has this little tiny tail. You can see clearly if it's a male or female, and then you don't say Maseh Mechichen. It's interesting that the Maseh Mechichen is now not what the fact is but what other people looking are observing. I didn't realize that's what Pshat Maseches Menachos. I thought Maseches Menachos is, well, what's the fact? Now it's saying, well, what's it? It's not about what's the fact. It's what other people are looking at and are going to think is the fact.
When we say bringing, he's already shechted it in the wherever, north, south, whatever place, and bringing to the necessary parts to the Mizbeach. So isn't one up above the red line, one below the red line? Aren't we dealing with when you're looking at it, that shows
but let's just say we're talking about the shechita. At the time of the shechita, what is he thinking? What is he? Okay, so now the Gemara says, Ella, okay. Ella, people don't check on animals if it's male or female. So whether it has the fat tail, doesn't have the fat tail, that's not something that interests them. So people aren't going to notice that. Pesach sheshachtu l'shem ashram lirtu. What about a carbon Pesach? That if there's wrong intention on a carbon Pesach, that should invalidate it. The problem is that it really shouldn't invalidate it, according to Reb Shimon, because the ashram is 2 years old. The high ben shana, the high ben shtayim, because the carbon Pesach is in its first year, and the ashram is already in its second year. When it comes to kids, they're very careful about this. 1 year and 2 months, and so it's clearly not. It's clearly not a carbon Pesach. It's already older than a year. Okay, so it should be kosher according to Reb Shimon. So it's given the kashim nazir, asham mitzayra leipsikli. Well, the asham nazir and asham mitzayra are actually in the first year, so it could still be confusing, and it's not ma'aseh mechichen. But let's say his intentions are that it's the other type of asham gezelis or asham milas, where he denied, he swore, and he ended up stealing money, or maybe it's meila, he had personal use of consecrated items, so he should have to, by mistake. Then he should. Those are 2 years old. And so clearly, this Pesach is not that, because this Pesach is in its first year. Let's say you did it the other way. Let's say you shechted the 2-year-old with intention that it should be a carbon Pesach, and not 2 years old. It's in its second year, which means it's 1 year old. So lirtu, that should be an appeasement. The Pesach ben shtei shanim, because you see clearly that what you're thinking is not actually what it is. People don't look at animals like that, thinking, "Oh, it's a year old. It's not 1 year old." So they don't. Because we have animals that they look like they're in their second year. They're really in the first year. They look like they're in the first. They're really in the second year. So it's not Maseches Menachos. So all of this would be a problem.
Petting zoo, nobody really is. How old is it?
Determine if it's in the second year, the second person.
We're not looking at those things, right? What do you mean? It could be used. Yeah, but we're saying he's slaughtering it now as a carbon Pesach, let's say, and it's in its first year. He's thinking that it should be an asham. So we're saying just ignore the thought, because clearly it's in its first year. Everyone can tell that the statement that he's making is insignificant because of his action.
But can you make Korban Pesach? You can only make it one time,
Right.
or whatever. The only other Korban is Shlomim.
Right.
You can also make an Asham at that time.
I
Sounds
guess
like
so. I guess so.
When we were learning Zvakim and the subject came up about the ages, I thought it was very peculiar that the ages for certain Zvakim was not up to 1 year or up to 2 years, and then 2 years and a day. There was a hefsek. So there might be a year in which you can't be brought it up, And now it occurs to me for the first time that was so that they could tell the difference in age. Is that right?
Maybe there was something called a palgos or something that was a month after it was in its first year, before the second year. It was like there was like this. I imagine it like davening shachar till chatzais, but then you have a half hour where you can't do anything, and then mincha can only be a half hour afterwards. So there's like this palgas, this animal it's in the middle. It's not the first year, it's not the second year. You have to something like that.
There's nothing to do with Shana Ibor. It's just one. It's not
No. Sorry, sheshachtel shemashim lertzu the heitzem vayser. What about the other way? Let's say you have a goat. This must be a chatas that you're shechting as an asham. And where else would a sar be? No, maybe it's an oila. Let me see what they say over here. Tell me which carbon they're referring to. No, it's a chatas. A chatas that's being slaughtered as an asham. Asham is only brought from a ram, not as a goat. A sheep or a ram. And this is being brought as a goat. So obviously this is a chatas, and that's an asham. So obviously it's not an asham. Because you look at the hair, it doesn't even have the wool that an asham would have. Where it says, well, you can also confuse that because Amri Dichra Uchmahu, you could say that it's a ram that has dark hair and it doesn't have the same things. We'll say maybe it really is a sheep. Okay. Let's say an egel and par, a cow. This is the cow family that are being brought for a carbon pesach. The egel b'par b'pesach v'asham lecha, because there's no such thing as a cow that's being brought as a carbon pesach or an asham. So it should be an appeasement. Obviously, you know it's not a pesach or an asham. You're right. So what did we mean by zvachim? When we said that by zvachim, Reb Shimon would say differently. He says roiv zvachim, majority. By majority of them, I could be confused, but by the ones that we mentioned, actually not confused, and it would be satisfactory. Now, we didn't end up answering. What about the mavar hu delayavar? Mavar hu delayavar. We didn't answer that in Reb Shimon. So Rashi said. Rashi says we had a problem that maybe me'avar hudayavar, right? Maybe we should ignore the machshava, but Reb Shimon says ignore the machshava because ma'aseh mechichin. We said no, maybe it's not ma'aseh mechichin. Maybe the machshava is actually correct. And the fact that he's doing it this way is just because he's violating the rules. So Rashi says that by a carbon mincha, that's not going to be an issue because the way you're doing it is the way that it is. So it doesn't matter what you're thinking because there's no such thing as maybe it was really something else and your thoughts are really correct because the fact, however you're bringing it, that's what establishes what it is. So there's no such thing as maybe it's really differently, right? So you just ignore the thoughts because the way you're bringing it then. What about that one case where we said before that the chatas oif is going to be valid? Reb Shimon would agree to that it's going to be valid. So Rashi says that over there you're doing two things. Hillel mentioned this before. There you're doing two things wrong, and we don't think that you would violate two things. First of all, you're putting the application of the blood on the bottom and not on the top, and also you're sprinkling it and you're not squeezing it. So there's two things. So we're not going to say mever the avar. We're not going to say that you're violating two things. You're doing everything wrong. That we're not going to say. The problem is over here, the Gemara just said Here, the designation won't even work. That's what we're saying. But these are animals that the designation won't even work. You can't say in these cases, maver davar, that you're just violating the rule. You're bringing the wrong sacrifice because it won't even work to designate as an animal like that. That must be the pshat.
This is great for kids in yeshiva who are doing things. If the kid's doing everything wrong, you say, there's no way he would do everything wrong, but if he does a few things wrong, so you're in trouble. Go ahead.
It depends. So yeah.
Very good party.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah. So what are you asking? Which the Shimon holds that even that would be acceptable, right? Even the wrong thought, if you have the wrong thoughts, it would still be acceptable because you see what it is, right? Not according to the rabbis, right? The rabbis don't say that. Yeah, that was the way in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said it's disqualified. Okay, now we were explaining all of this. Ended up explaining Rabbah, and where Rabbah gave an answer to a contradiction in Reb Shimon. It said that there was a difference between if you had different intention for the wrong karban, or if you had intention for the wrong owner. Intention for the wrong owner, that would actually mess it up according to Reb Shimon, but intention for the wrong sacrifice, that Reb Shimon would accept that Maseches Menachos, and you can look at the sacrifice and see that the intention is insignificant. Rav Amalei Kasha, Rava says it's really no question. He's going to answer the contradiction in Reb Shimon that we learned yesterday. Depends what's he doing the scoop in the mincha for? Is he doing it for a korban mincha? Is he doing it for the vessel? I'm sorry. Is he doing that? I'm mixing up with the Rav Ashi. Is he doing the mincha for a mincha, for one mincha, for another mincha? That we say is acceptable. But if you're doing the scoop of a mincha and you're thinking that it's actually a sacrifice, then we say that it would be invalid. Mincha l'shem mincha. Why is it we say that it's acceptable? That there's one law. We learn it from a pasuk. There's one law for all mincha. And so therefore, even if you had intention for a different one, it's still going to be acceptable and it will satisfy the owner's obligation. Mincha l'shem zebach, it says, mincha v'zebach leksiv. It doesn't say, this is the law of mincha and sacrifices. It says, it's the law of mincha. So only when you confuse two minchas together do we say it's acceptable, but not if you confuse a mincha and a animal sacrifice.
But the preparation is the same, right? It's just a question of when it's part of the animal sacrifice, in some way it gets joined with the behemoth, right?
Yes, I think the pshat in this is, I think that Daniel was saying this yesterday, the pshat is you're actually thinking that this is a korban shlamim, that this is an animal sacrifice, even though it's clearly not.
Mm-hmm.
It says, what are you telling me that based on these psukim? That's totally not what Reb Shimon said. Reb Shimon said, you look at what you're doing and you see if it's possible to be the way you're thinking. It has nothing to do with the psukim. Why did he tell me about Maseches Menachos? You look at what's the fact, and then you disregard his intention. So it's Hachi Kamar. Afagav the machshavet le minkri tifsel zeisar semincha terachas chalam menachos. My yavel bezvachim yenekin. Afagav the b'shchitach zakulim zeisar semincha v'zevach leiksiv. Okay, the logic over here, what the Gemara is doing now, is exactly the opposite of the way we've been thinking the whole time. The way we were thinking the whole time was that if it's clearly not the way that it was, then that's more kosher, right? If it's clearly not the way that he's thinking, it's more kosher. Now he's saying no, exactly the opposite. If it's clearly not the way he's thinking, then it actually could be kosher. If it's clearly not the way he's thinking, then it should be pasul. The opposite, exactly the opposite, because he's totally messing it up. So the words of minkara are getting translated differently. The machshavah minkri, the tifsel, even though it's not clear, even though it says minkra, but even though it's not clear that it's clearly not this, right? That's what we mean to say. It should be puzzle. However, the pasuk tells me that it's still correct. So then, what do you do by the carbon? What we mean to say is that even though there's one shechita for both, so it does look like it's the same because there's one shechita for all animals. So it should be, everything should be like the same, and so it should be kosher. But nevertheless, it says Zaystar Mincha. It doesn't say that. So really, the pasuk is really what we're learning from. That Maaseh Menachos that we quoted was just, maybe we should say that it's the opposite of the pasuk. Kamashmalan, the pasuk tells me that no, by a mincha you can confuse them, even though it's clearly not the same. And the pasuk tells me that it's still kosher, even if it's confused. And by the carbon, even though it looks like it's the same, but the pasuk tells me that it's not the same. Elamiyata, if that's the case, let me get to a place where I can stop. Chatas chelev sheshach l'shem chatas dam l'shem chatas avedus kav l'shem chatas nazal l'shem chatas b'ntayra, take sheira of a tirtza. That should be kosher, because I have another pasuk that says dam rachman of zeis teres chatas, which is terachas chalachatais. If you confuse one chatas with another chatas, whether it's because of this was supposed to be brought for chelev, the person ate chelev and he brings it because he ate dam, he has the wrong intention, or for a different aveira, or for a chatas nazar, or for something else, it should all be acceptable because I have the pasuk, the same pasuk that it says by a mincha, zeis teres a mincha, which tells me that even if you confuse it, it's good. So it says zeis teres chatas. The Gemara says, Reb Shimon Achinami, you're right. Reb Shimon would probably say the same thing. L'Rabbanan, but according to the Rabbanan, Ha'amarava chatas chelev sheshach l'shem chatas dam l'shem chatas avedus kechavim ksheira. If you mix that up, chatas chelev for a chatas dam, that would be kosher. However, l'shem chatas nazal, l'shem chatas mitzayir is possible. But if you mix up, if it's a which aveira it was, that's going to be kosher. But which chatas it is, that's going to be possible. Because these, you have to bring an oila together with it. Now, what does that mean? Rashi gives 3 pshatim here. And one pshat is because maybe he's bringing it for the sake of the oila. The nazir has to bring an oila together with his chatas. It's possible to say that it's l'meimar, l'shem oilas nazir shachat. It's a chatas that's being slaughtered for an oila, because he's bringing an oila together with it. That's one pshat of Rashi. Another pshat of Rashi is that these types of chatais are not for sins. These types of chatais are doing a different job. They're allowing him to now finish his naziris, or it's allow him to come back into the community, or to bring sacrifices if he was a mitzayra. So it has a different function. Now, just 1 second. Rav Acha Brei Rava Masin Lekula Psula. Rav Acha Brei Rava says that they're all pasul. You have a clear pasuk that says that it has to be slaughtered for a chatas. It has to be slaughtered for specifically. No, so the pasuk of zeis teres chatas, which would include all chatas together, which tells me that they're kosher. Whether you're confused or not, just like we did by the carbon mincha, according to Reb Shimon, I have a pasuk by the chatas that does exactly the opposite. So I don't have the zeis teres chatas anymore because I have a shachadei shal chatas. They have to make very specific which chatas you're bringing for. Okay, we're up to Rav Ashi Yamar. Yeah, but nevertheless, it's not really. That's one shot. That's not all the shots over there. We'll say that we're following a different opinion. Okay, have a good day.
Didn't take this Gemara long to get confusing.
Can you tell us to have a great day?
Have a great day.
Thank you, sir. Woo!
Have a great day. Thank you.